It was a calm afternoon in the heart of the city. A popular restaurant was bustling with people enjoying their meals, chatting, and simply unwinding. Among them was a woman named Maya, a poised and confident black woman in her early 30s. Dressed in professional attire, Maya was seated alone at a corner table, quietly working on her laptop and sipping her coffee. She was known to frequent this peaceful place where she could focus away from the distractions of the office. But that day, something unusual happened. Across the room, a police officer named Officer Bradley entered the restaurant. He was a tall, stocky man with an air of authority that seemed to demand attention wherever he went. He was there responding to a vague complaint from a customer who had claimed that someone suspicious was behaving inappropriately at the establishment. No details were provided, but Bradley had assumed he knew what he was walking into. As his eyes scanned the room, they landed on Maya. She stood out, not because of anything she was doing, but simply because she was one of the few black patrons in the restaurant. Despite her calm demeanor and professional appearance, Bradley made a snap judgment. Without much thought or investigation, he approached her table. "Ma'am," he said in a stern voice, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby diners. "I need to see some identification." Maya looked up, startled but composed. "I'm sorry, is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. "We've had a report of someone causing trouble here," he said, crossing his arms. "You fit the description. I need to see your ID, now." The room grew quiet as people started to watch the scene unfold. Maya, remaining calm, closed her laptop. "I'm not sure what you mean by causing trouble, officer. I've been sitting here working on my computer. Can you tell me more about the complaint?" Bradley's face hardened. He didn't like being questioned. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he snapped. "Show me your ID, or I'll have to take you in." Maya took a slow breath. She had dealt with situations like this before and knew how quickly things could escalate. "Officer," she said firmly but respectfully, "I'm not refusing to cooperate, but I would like to know why you're targeting me. I haven't done anything wrong." Bradley, his patience wearing thin and his assumptions clouding his judgment, decided he had heard enough. "Stand up," he barked. "You're coming with me." By now, the entire restaurant was watching in stunned silence. Some diners whispered among themselves, others pulled out their phones to record. Maya stood up slowly, her expression unreadable. As Bradley grabbed her arm to handcuff her, she said calmly, "I suggest you think very carefully about what you're doing." But Bradley wasn't listening. He slapped the handcuffs on her wrists, ignoring her protests and the murmurs of disbelief from the crowd. As he started to lead her toward the door, Maya decided it was time to drop the bombshell. "Officer," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You might want to check my credentials before you take another step." Bradley scoffed. "Yeah? What credentials would those be?" Maya turned to look at him directly. "I'm Special Agent Maya Carter, FBI." The restaurant went dead silent. Bradley froze, the color draining from his face. "What did you just say?" he stammered. "I said," Maya repeated, her voice steady, "I'm an FBI agent. My badge is in my bag, which you didn't bother to check before arresting me in front of all these people. You've made a serious mistake." For a moment, Bradley didn't know what to do. His grip on her arm loosened, and his eyes darted around the room, as if searching for a way to salvage the situation. The diners were no longer just whispering, they were openly criticizing him, some calling out his blatant bias and abuse of power. "Uncuff her," someone shouted from the back of the room. Realizing he was in deep trouble, Bradley fumbled with the keys to remove the handcuffs. Maya rubbed her wrists once they were free, but her calm demeanor never wavered. "Thank you," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to retrieve my badge." She walked back to her table, opened her bag, and pulled out her FBI identification. Holding it up for everyone to see, she addressed the crowd. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when someone abuses their authority and acts on prejudice instead of facts. The restaurant erupted in applause. Bradley, meanwhile, looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Before he could stammer out an apology, Maya turned to him. "Officer Bradley," she said, her tone icy, "you'll be hearing from my office soon. I suggest you start preparing your reporter and your resignation." With that, Maya collected her belongings and walked out of the restaurant, leaving a stunned and humiliated Bradley behind. The videos taken by the diners quickly went viral, sparking outrage across social media and calls for accountability. Maya's composure and courage in the face of such blatant discrimination became a symbol of resilience and justice, proving once again that no one is above the law and no one should be judged by the color of their skin. As Maya left the restaurant, the buzz of conversation and outrage followed her. She had no intention of letting this incident slide. Not because of her own humiliation, as she had faced worse during her career, but because of what it represented. Too often, people without her authority or resources were subjected to the same kind of profiling, without any way to fight back. This time, she had the power to make sure it didn't go unnoticed. By the time Maya reached her car, her phone was already buzzing with notifications. Videos from the restaurant had begun circulating on social media, and several colleagues were reaching out. She wasn't surprised when her supervisor, Special Agent Thompson, called. "Maya," he began, his voice a mix of concern and frustration, "I just saw the video. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Maya replied. "But this situation is far from over." Thompson sighed. "I figured as much. Look, the Bureau is going to back you on this, but it's already turning into a PR storm. The department's reputation is on the line." "Good," Maya said firmly. "Because this is bigger than me, Thompson. That officer thought he could treat me like a criminal just because of how I look. Imagine what he's doing to people who don't have a badge to protect them." Thompson agreed. "I understand. File your report as soon as possible. The department's internal affairs team will handle the officer, but I want you to take the lead in coordinating with the press. You're the face of this now, like it or not." Maya hung up and took a moment to collect her thoughts. She knew the coming days would be a whirlwind of media appearances, meetings, and likely legal action. But if it meant shining a light on systemic issues and holding people like Officer Bradley accountable, it was worth it. The next morning, Maya woke to find the story had exploded. News outlets across the country were picking it up, with headlines like "FBI agent wrongfully arrested by racist officer" dominating the airwaves. Clips from the restaurant were everywhere, showing Maya's calm demeanor in contrast to Bradley's aggression. Social media was ablaze with hashtags calling for his immediate firing and broader police reform. Meanwhile, Officer Bradley was facing mounting pressure. His department issued a lukewarm statement, claiming they were investigating the incident. But that wasn't enough to stem the backlash. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, demanding accountability not just for Bradley, but for a system that allowed such behavior to persist. Maya, for her part, decided to go public. She gave an exclusive interview to a prominent journalist, recounting the events with the same composure she had shown in the restaurant. She didn't focus on herself but on the larger issue. "This isn't about one officer or one incident," Maya said. "It's about a culture of bias and abuse of power that has gone unchecked for too long. I was lucky I had my badge and my position to protect me. But what about the people who don't? How many voices are silenced because they're not believed or because they're too afraid to speak out?" Her words struck a chord, sparking national conversations about racial profiling and police accountability. Activists, politicians, and even some law enforcement officials joined the dialogue, calling for meaningful reforms. As the days passed, the investigation into Bradley's actions uncovered a troubling pattern. Several complaints had been filed against him over the years, all from minorities, alleging similar behavior. None of the complaints had been taken seriously until now. With public pressure mounting, the department had no choice but to suspend Bradley pending further investigation. For Maya, the fight wasn't over. She used the momentum to push for change within the FBI as well, advocating for mandatory bias training and better accountability measures for all law enforcement agencies. She partnered with civil rights organizations to amplify the voices of those who had been wronged but never heard. Months later, Bradley was officially terminated from his position, and the department implemented new policies to address systemic bias. But for Maya, the real victory was seeing the ripple effect her experience had created. Communities were mobilizing, demanding justice and reform in ways that couldn't be ignored. Maya returned to her work with renewed purpose. She hadn't sought out the spotlight, but now that it had found her, she was determined to use it. Every case she worked, every speech she gave, every conversation she had was a step toward a future where no one would have to face what she did that day in the restaurant. Because in the end, Maya knew this was about more than one officer, one arrest, or even one system. It was about a vision for a fairer, more just society, one she would keep fighting for, no matter how long it took.